This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London.
So the second panel is gender, genre, self, and other, genre, moi et l'autre. And our first speaker is Alison Rice. Professor Rice specializes in 20th and 21st century Francophone literature. Her teaching and research interests include autobiography, critical theory, post-colonial studies, immigrant and second-generation literature, translation theory, contemporary women's writing, music in literature, and francophonie in a large sense. That's all. Her first book, Time Signatures, Contextualizing Contemporary Francophone Autobiographical Writing from the Maghreb, published in 2006 by Lexington Books, closely examines the work of Hélène Cixous, Assia Djebar, and Abdel Hatibi. The second book, Polygraphies, Francophone Women Writing in Algeria, published in 2012 at the University of Virginia Press, focuses on autobiographical writings by 7 of the most prominent Francophone women writers from Algeria today. Her current book project, inspired by a series of filmed interviews she conducted in Paris, explores the present proliferation of women writers of French from around the world. And her talk today is entitled Elle, Linda Lay's Literary Novel.
Tongue twister. Thank you so much, Michelle. I hope I'm going to make this work correctly. Linda Lay is a femme de lettres, as the French expression would have it, in the two meanings of the term. She is a writer, and she is well-versed in literature. She is the prolific author of a corpus of fiction, but her written work isn't limited to creative composition. She has also completed collections of essays that engage with the publications of a variety of authors from various linguistic traditions, as we saw this morning. But Linda Lay is also a woman of letters in the sense that she is drawn to the letters of the alphabet in a very literal manner, as her writings illustrate. In roman, this propensity to contemplate letters and what they stand for comes to the surface when a main character, who is designated by a letter herself, the significant letter L, must undergo a medical procedure commonly known by its acronym, and we call it an MRI in English. It is the first of these substitutes for the French abbreviation for magnetic resonance imaging that recurs with the greatest frequency in this text, given that Elle often finds refuge in the idyllique romaine, royaume des mots, this paradisiacal location where the letters combine to form words that can be arranged and rearranged ad infinitum. This act is addressed in a 2011 text by Linda Lay, in which the first-person narrator affirms that her universe is ruled by the rights of writing. It is no accident that this avowal appears in an epistolary text, for as the title suggests, À l'enfant que je n'aurai pas consists of a long letter intended for the son she will never have. And of course, we've already seen this morning to what extent letters are present throughout her oeuvre. Letters constitute a unique form of communication, one that roman understands as particularly suited to personal revelations and unparalleled connections. Il s'écrirait en toute franchise, à la manière des habitants d'une planète lointaine qui s'enverrait des SOS. In an age when instant communication, sorry, this is not the right word. That's strange. Yeah, it is. Okay. I'm going just a word. In the interest of time, I'm not going to be reading entire quotations, just snippets from them, or just projecting them up. So I'm sorry, but I won't have the time to take advantage of these wonderful words. In an age when instant communication has become the norm, this recourse to pen, paper, and the post may appear outdated, but the instigator of this correspondence is aware of its profound possibilities. Pour rien au monde, il n'aurait voulu échanger avec elle des emails, qui aurait été un moyen plus simple, plus rapide de s'écrire. The rhythm of the writing, of the reading, of the waiting that characterizes this exchange of letters adds to its intensity, as well as its intimacy. And if he has found himself sharing his private life with his correspondent in writing, He has also discovered intimate details about her through this exercise. Il se confiait certaines choses qui s'étaient jusqu'alors dissimulées à eux-mêmes. The epistolary space not only allows for self-revelation, it also opens up to a deep appreciation for the other. Il avait appris à lire en elle depuis qu'il s'écrivait. Letters enter into this text on other levels as well. Since before Roman began to communicate with Elle, he had become passionate about the letters that the French poet Camille Potsy wrote to Paul Valéry, as well as those composed by the French artist Camille Claudel, which Roman goes so far as to cite at length in his own letters to Elle. It is this careful work of copying, this fastidious task of reproducing by hand, that matters so much to the author of these letters. Going over these words again and again, poring over their content, and reworking their details until they are free from error, are gestures that recall lettering, the act or process of inscribing with or making letters. Lettering is an act filled with meaning, a movement that infuses words with a significance that comes from an attention to the beauty of the artifact, to its tangible nature. For lettering is akin to engraving, to the creation of words that, unlike those that figure in an email or a text message, will leave a trace. And this is a footnote to recall that Gillian published an article in which she focuses on tracing, erasing, and retracing in the writing of Linda Lay. And she also mentions that she is a femme de lettres and that physical letters and not just literary works make up this definition in Linda Lay's case. Thanks to the work that has gone into their creation, these letters can be touched, even caressed in a very real sense, on the page. The events that necessitated the aforementioned MRI and a subsequent surgical intervention is a ruptured cerebral aneurysm that Elle is fortunate to emerge from with no lasting effects. This initial encounter with the shortcomings of her body, combined with a second similar incident requiring medical attention, does make its mark on her in another way, and in a rather positive manner. She is the survivor of a stroke that could have altered her life in so many ways, that could have even put an end to her days, but that instead has led to a decisive, definitive transformation in attitude. In her life, there is no doubt that a division can be made between before and after this brush with death. And this experience prompts her to think of another, who wasn't as lucky as she. Elle n'aurait pas pensé à lui si ce n'était pas arrivé. Indeed, her medical crisis triggers the memory of a lost loved one. Rather than continuing to evoke the trauma of Elle's accident, this literary work repeatedly returns to this earlier shock, reformulating over and over the certainty that Elle would have led a different life if this younger sibling had survived. This is a founding event around which the writer's entire corpus revolves. On devinait que tout dans ses livres tournait autour de cette absence, de ce vide. This double who lies in an anonymous grave is the one to whom she has spent her life, as well as her life's work, doubling back. Elle avait toujours eu le regard tourné en arrière, passant son existence à regretter d'avoir été privée du son nom. The structure not only of her bibliography, but also of her biography, has therefore been altered by the disappearance of this beloved being. Elle aurait suivi sans fléchir une ligne droite, elle ne se serait pas perdue en chemin. But the impact of Elle's writing, like that of Linda Lay's literary work, may in fact gain from its failure to follow the straight line. The lack of a linear plot is arguably the element that gives Roman its novel strength. Like other textual creations signed by Linda Lay, Roman is made up of numerous circular gestures that in this case are all connected to the medical event related at the outset. Its lengthy sentences revisit circumstances that precede this occurrence and then jump to circumstances that follow it, encircling this momentous cerebral accident within narrative movements that nonetheless gradually go forward, advancing chronologically. And yet any sense of progression is disrupted by returns to earlier events, through evocations of incidents and themes that have already emerged. Looping thus abounds in this work, adding density and depth to descriptions and reflections. By continually providing complementary details, by constantly filling in gaps in the story with complicated musings that add crucial layers of comprehension, the reading experience is enriched and intensified. Among the looping gestures that characterize Roman is the frequent reappearance of references to a book that Elle completed shortly before her stroke. This published work focuses on 3 talented women who were involved in amorous relationships with renowned men who overshadowed them. Both in their work and in their love affairs, Tao Sampouche, Karen Pottsy, and Camille Claudel took a back seat to Jean Giono, Paul Valéry, and Auguste Rodin, respectively. And Elle contemplates whether or not this devotion didn't have a negative effect on the creative capacities of these 3 individuals. In Elle's analyses, interspersed throughout Roman, it becomes clear that these women provided their companions with intellectual and emotional support that was never duly acknowledged. Elle owes her awareness to these women's similar plights to the insights of Roman. And in a cyclical gesture that stands out in stark contrast to the unappreciative stance of these well-known artists and writers, Elle repeatedly recognizes her debt to this man for giving her the idea and providing the inspiration to write the essay on these women. Roman is fully aware that his relationship with Elle bears much in common with these relationships, with one significant transformation. C'était lui qui tenait le rôle de l'aimant, lui. The inversion of gendered roles that characterizes their couple is important in this work, for it is Elle who is the writer in this case, and Roman who contributes to the development of her thought and provides her with passion. While Elle and Roman meet up in person on occasion, listening to music and sharing conversation, it is their letters that have the strongest effect on them, that keep them coming back for more. Even when she wants to break things off, Elle cannot wrest herself from the binding power of their epistolary exchange. Indeed, this form of communication has created a connection that cannot easily be undone. Elle may be profoundly convinced that she must put an end to her relationship with Roman, but she is aware of what this would mean for this sensitive young man, whose frequent trips abroad bring him a feeling of peace that inevitably disappears every time he returns to Paris. He repeatedly goes away, heading to different destinations in Asia that help him forget the ills that haunt him. But when he comes back to the French capital, the animals whose French name bears a striking resemblance to the English term louping take off after him again. And he lands once more in a psychiatric facility. Les loups lancés à sa poursuite. Elle comes to the realization that her reliable presence at his side in these moments of crisis is contributing to his frequent hospitalizations, and decides that she must put an end to this destructive cycle. Elle must stop writing letters to Roman, even though this is deeply difficult for her. Leaning. Roman is not the only man in the writer's life. She has been in a relationship for 10 years with Big, an artist who knows her well and is quick to denounce her attraction to people whose fragile mental state is likely to exacerbate her own instability. He knows that her weakness for those whose own weakness can be disruptive to her well-being could have serious consequences, and his thoughts reveal his deep concern for his companion. Sorry, did I skip? That's strange. Okay. Il ferait tout pour avertir Elle de ses penchants romanesques. Comme disait son ami d'âme, la perdrait un jour. In a single sentence, Bay establishes a crucial connection between the troubles that plague Elle outside the text and her predispositions that are inextricably related to the text. Elle's leaning, to take out Bay's word of choice when he says ses penchants romanesques, that are inextricably related, Elle's leaning is unmistakably novelistic, and this proclivity comes at a potentially high price when it spills into her behavior beyond the book. This is clear from early on in Roman. Roman, dont le prénom était destiné à intriguer Elle, dès leur première rencontre. She couldn't help but be attracted to him, for his very name appeals to her most instinctive inclinations. She is utterly drawn to fiction. Roman himself is quick to chalk up certain patterns of conduct to which Elle regularly reverts, to her tendency to be oriented toward literature. He takes up the term leaning in his analyses as well, but provides the loaded word with a different spin than Bay and Elle's former flame put on it. It is this leaning that determines Elle's looping. Roman attribué à son immaturité et à ses penchants d'ivresse, cet entêtement mis à poursuivre sa recherche d'un autre soi-même. Indeed, it is this leaning that determines Elle's looping in literature and in life, as the writer continually returns to the missing brother, whom she believes would have been her ideal complement, and whom she hopes to replace with the willing and competent man. The fact that Roman views Elle's embrace of all that belongs to the literary realm with a less critical eye than others lends itself to a reflection on the role of reading in this book. Roman makes up, in many senses, a literary lesson, reminding those who peruse its pages that real reading requires close attention to nuance and possibility. The narrative voice cautions against casting a hasty judgment on circumstances that are much more complex than they might first appear. Un observateur pressé aurait dit que B incarnait la face diurne, tandis que Roman représentait ce qu'il y avait de nocturne en elle. After advancing this possible interpretation of the position these two men occupy in Elle's life, the text goes on to make it clear that this is an insufficient assessment of the situation. Indeed, reading literary works is an act that is strengthened by sensitivity and empathy, qualities that not everyone possesses. Here, l'inconsolé les avait mieux décryptés, parce que secrètement, il était plus en accord avec ce qu'ils exprimaient. Certainly, some texts will speak to potential readers differently than others, and this will depend on personal dispositions. But some, like Roman, will be prone to taking a liking to books that others, such as Bay, will find baffling. It appears that Bay appreciates the style of Elle's prose, but doesn't have an affinity for the content of her work. Roman, with his more intimate understanding of Elle's writing, has his own take on Bay's inability to savor her work. Ces fragments d'un discours sur des amours clandestines, mais d'autant plus dévastatrices, ne pouvaient toucher quelqu'un d'aussi peu inflammable. Bay is not oriented in the same way Roman is. Bay keeps himself at a safe distance from passion, with all the risks that this sentiment entails. He is consequently forever located at a remove from the possibility of impetuous action, from the option of spontaneous submission. According to this line of thinking, Bay is located outside the boundaries of literature, in another realm that is governed by reason and self-control. The intertextual nod to Roland Barthes' fragment d'un discours amoureux in this passage implies that in order to resonate with a text of this nature, you have to have experienced love on some level yourself, or at least to have a certain sensitivity allowing you to perceive the experience of another. The inclusion of this evocative expression connected to Barthes' well-known publication also creates a resonance within this recent literary work, thanks to the playful echo it provides of a pleasurable textual precedent. But the pleasure of this text will elude readers who aren't open to the sparks the written work contains. It won't fuel the passion of those who remain impervious to the light and the heat the literary flame gives off. If her leaning is entirely different from that of her partner, if she has a penchant not only for closely reading and deeply appreciating books penned by others, but also for putting together her own texts, Elle can be seen as aligned with Michel Leiris's work, as Jean-Jacques Thomas articulates it in his introduction to an issue of the journal Substance, devoted entirely to the Belgian poet's oeuvre. Leiris's goal is clear. He wishes to change his life. Jumping here, the fallacy of the established fact resides in discontinuous naming. And jump again. To change his life, one must begin by refusing to let oneself be intimidated by the totalitarianism of dictionaries. Leiris has eluded this totalitarianism for Thomas through the invention of his own glossary, the foremost illustration of which can be found in the citation, femme, sans elle? We might change this interrogatory phrase in light of Lindelay's roman to read as an exclamatory, femme, flamme sans elle, to laud the complicated ways in which this writer's work in roman, like Lindelay's in a larger sense, engages in discontinuous naming in order to continually question the givens in our society, in our forms of expression, and in our literary traditions. Longing. Literature has the ability to change lives, as Roman testifies when he speaks with his most intimate interlocutor. Sa vie avait commencé le jour où il s'était pris de passion pour ses livres. It is a certain type of text that touches him, as Roman avows, one that dares to seek, that isn't content to repeat pat answers or have recourse to established convention. If he has encountered a variety of works that have sustained him, the most important œuvre has undeniably been that composed by elle. Ces livres lui étaient nécessaires à lui. Literature has been equally important to elle, who has found that writing is a crucial coping mechanism that often contributes to healing. For her, writing contains the powerful possibility of living a second life, a form of escape that is also the means of an affirming self-realization. It is striking that through these literary incarnations and reincarnations, she is able to bring to life a number of protagonists, a number of alter egos, all different from each other, ranging from the pitiless clairvoyant individual to the eternal foreigner condemned to live with the feeling she has usurped her place. It is in the variety of texts that the writer has composed that she is able to live with all of her contradictions. Just as Elle does not remain true to a single version of herself, one that would appear unified and coherent, and would conform to perceived societal expectations, to the predetermined definitions acceptable for a woman of foreign origin who lives and writes in France, so her literary creations do not fall into clearly defined, perceptible categories. Even Roman, perhaps her closest and most perceptive reader, doesn't know how to classify her work. The book titled Roman is the embodiment of this ambiguity. It is a text that revels in its own indeterminacy, containing passages devoted to an essay that make of this very work an essay. The emphasis placed on concepts and expressions in the form of italicized words serves to reinforce the impression that this text could be called an essay. And yet, as the title suggests, in the absence of a generic confirmation on the book's cover, Roman is also a work of fiction, a novel of sorts that circles around facts taken from life, that plays with convention and reveals personal details, that stirs up desire, nostalgia, and envy in the writer who yearns to know more, but mostly within the writer herself, the writer who reflects and remains at a distance from Lindelay, she whose entire oeuvre is infused with such longing, a literary longing that is absolutely essential to writing. If a sense of plenitude were ever attained outside the text, this continuous work would come to an end, and this is impossible. The love story between Elle and Roman is the tale of overwhelming desire between the homophonic Elle and the book. I would like to take this exploration of genre a little bit further and suggest that Roman can also be read as a long letter. In line with some of the comments Lindelay has already made during interviews about texts like Lettres mortes and À l'enfant que je n'aurai pas, les deux livres sont liés dans son esprit, elle dit. Tous deux posent des questions qui me hantent, à savoir la culpabilité, la solitude, l'inaptitude à vivre sans être constamment taraudé par le scepticisme, le sentiment d'être en déphasage, la folie. When Bay evokes the lack of modesty that characterizes the personal letters that Elle spends hours studying as if they were literary masterpieces in this work, his criticisms could be leveled at Roman itself, the work in which they appear. Interminable confession, for instance, by bringing up Bay's denunciation of ces divagations that are the fruit of a graphomane, whose greatest love is to se raconter et tout décortiquer. The writer of Romans fends off similar critiques of her text by presenting them within the work itself. This is a brilliant move that is, once again, circular in form and brings us back to the looping in L's literary creations. The mother figure, who appears infrequently in this text, possesses nonetheless the voice that points out the preponderant place that literature occupies in L's life. Tout dans le monde qui était le sien tournait autour de la littérature, avec pour origine la littérature, pour fin la littérature. This insight into L's literary looping takes on particular meaning when it comes to Roman, a protagonist who appears to have emerged directly from one of L's publications, according to Bay's multiple observations. What is striking about Bay's reading of Roman is that it evokes another possible meaning of looping, referring to the process of fitting speech to film already shot. L'inconnu entrait dans le film que elle avait conçu. Bay is convinced that Roman has taken on this role with such utter conviction that he is nothing but this role. And it isn't only his speech, but also his written expressions that engage in this imitation game. Un type qui n'avait qu'une personnalité d'emprunt, chez qui tout était faux, car il ne prononçait pas une seule phrase qui ne fût une citation déguisée de tel ou tel récit. If Elle has already completed this script, this screenplay, and Roman is merely mouthing the words that she has written for him, if he has taken on life as a character simply according to the author who wrote him into this work, his participation is nonetheless constantly bordering on the evasive. The most notable looping that takes place in this text is that Roman, a being born of Elle's literary work, comes full circle, winding up in another literary work by Elle, this text that bears his name. Inserting Roman into her new novel is a gesture accompanied by the removal of Roman from the writer's life. Indeed, Elle deals with the growing distance between them by replacing Roman in the written work. In this way, the fin de lettre is able to continue the exchange of letters with this singular interlocutor. The epistolary dialogue is thus displaced, but it is not reduced to the brevity that characterizes so many contemporary messages, including their own at present. This is the solution Elle has found to her dilemma. Roman allows her to seek closure without a sense of finality, prolonging the sensations of the letters through the longing that leads to the literary. And this is my conclusion. While longing is always inevitably directed toward the unattainable, there is something profoundly satisfying in her written endeavors, for Elle is convinced that the life of literature is much more vivid than real life, a concept that emerges at several points in this text. According to her perspective, it is not a negative thing that Roman must leave this sphere of la vraie vie to enter into the fictional realm. The result is that he, like others who are transformed on the page, are going to be more alive than ever. In another text, Linda Lay makes reference to Michel Léris's 1979 Bifure, in which he asserts the following: L'art est ce qu'il y a de plus réel. Indeed, the literary is the strong, persistent source of longing that fuels Elle's fiction in Roman, and it is the world that, quote, imposes itself with strength, according to the formulation found in Lay's collection of critical reflections, Au fond de l'inconnu pour trouver du nouveau. It is significant that this text was published in 2009, the same year that Michel Léris's L'Âge d'Homme figured on the baccalaureate examination in French literature, which of course is something happening at this period of time in France. A text by Linda Lay has yet to be included in the corpus of works selected for this academic qualification that is, quote, an unofficial distinction, an award without a red carpet, according to an article published in Le Monde. Lay is not alone in being overlooked when it comes to this particular form of recognition. For dans cette épreuve où les auteurs de tous les siècles sont en compétition, les femmes n'auraient jamais été lauréates. This snub on the part of the national educational system in France makes it clear that the battle that Elle wages in subtle ways within the pages of Roman to bring attention to the plight of women who deserve renown, but who have faded in the shadow of the men they helped propel to glory, is part of what the character Roman refers to as the war of the sexes. Elle's work does not seek to put the men in these relationships on trial. She doesn't aim to accuse them of wrongdoing, but wants instead to reconstitute a moment in these women's lives to do justice to what has been overlooked. The writer is not a spokeswoman, but rather someone who is looking to the past with subtlety and nuance, searching to restore with precision that which could be forgotten. This is one way to counter current prejudices and perhaps to gently push toward a future in which fiction can bridge some of the perceived divides, not only between the sexes, but also between real life and the literary, so that we no longer read headlines like the following in major French newspapers. Le bac, elle, brouillé avec les femmes de lettres.